Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for this latest episode of Big Brother's Big Archive. My name's Carl Bainbridge, and joining me as ever, my co-host, Mr. Carl Dutton.
Yes, we are here to talk about the latest and greatest, and, well, the latest and alright.
And Mr. Paul Barron.
They let me out the box! The light! It's so glorious!
And thank you very much for joining us for this show today, Paul, on quite short notice as well.
No problem.
Of course, Mitchell, usually our main presenter, he's been off to London, meeting all the ex-housemates, meeting Jamie East, Ben Duncan, etc. I quite like the rotational policy we've got on the show, actually. It reminds me of the new Top Gear team, actually.
I haven't watched the show since the main hosts left, the real people.
On the other hand, it has Joey from Friends.
What?
Yeah.
Matt LeBlanc's on that show?
Yeah.
Stops them going from the next series of Celebrity Big Brother then. So think of that as positive.
He'd be alright. He'd better star power than the usual.
Yep. But before we go off on a tangent, we have to say thank you very much for joining us for this latest episode, where, of course, as Carl sort of mentioned here, we were talking about the most recent series, which is Celebrity Big Brother 17, which, of course, took place in January, earlier in this month. And we were just discussing about this earlier in the show. It's a bit of a mixed bag of a series.
Well, when you say on the show, you mean off the air, but no, this is one of those shows that I enjoyed, and I saw some people turning it for some reasons, but I enjoyed this series. There was a point at the start to about the midway point where it was really, really good, and then it kind of took a downturn later on. But I do like that we got some likeable people out of this, and it was a fun show. As always with these celebrity shows, I don't follow the OK Magazine kind of culture, so I don't know who any of these people are unless they've been on like a TV show that I've watched or some sort of reality show or something. Which I don't watch. I'm a Celebrity. I don't watch any of those other shows. It's the only one of those that I do watch, so I don't know who any of them are. So to me, I just took them as the personalities they were on the show, and for that, it was an enjoyable season all round, I think.
It's a bit mad considering the fact that now you possibly get on the show if you know a celebrity.
Or if you're a loose woman, or if you're a member of the Towie crowd or the Geordie crowd, or if you're in any sort of D-list show, or even in this case, as in the last couple of series, if you're a model, that's enough. You've been on a couple of billboards, you're a celebrity.
It's hope for me then. Yes, community radio DJ, so I'll be on Celebrity Big Brother 20. So
look, there's a chance at this point.
You've got to know a celebrity before you have to go on there. Apparently, that's a rule.
And we'll be discussing a lot of the issues surrounding the character types chosen for the celebrity version a little bit later on in the show. I have to say though, Carl, I share a lot of the sentiment to you. I thought this was a strong series to start off with. I think there was a moment early on, which we'll obviously be getting to later, which is probably going to go down in Big Brother folklore. And I think we did have some good characters, but it did get very tiresome very quickly. And I think the boot order as well, and having a lot of the biggest star power names leaving quite early, really started to hurt the season. And I think especially when one contestant in particular starts to come to the forefront, I feel the detriments of the show really started to shine through.
Well, again, it was a case of they were another group of uncontrollable people, and the people who were entertaining, some of the ones that left were left by their own choice. It wasn't down to, for the majority of the vote to save work this season, and we kept the people who, the boring ones went and the strong characters stayed. Unfortunately, the ones that they were playing off were the ones that walked, so.
Yes, certainly so. But it is a series which we are looking forward to talking about, whether it's in a positive context, whether it's in a negative context. And the first thing we're going to be bringing up is some of the pre-show stuff. And the first one is there was a lot of hype surrounding the series about its scale. This was going to be the longest and biggest celebrity version ever. It was going to be 16 housemates. It was going to be the longest length.
This was how many weeks longer than the usual?
Well, I think this was the full-on 4 weeks. Usually it runs for about 3.
Criminy, it makes it look like a friggin' marathon.
For the celebrity version, that's quite a big thing though. I mean, 16 housemates. Sometimes the civilian version, which lasts for about 9 or 10 weeks, doesn't even have that many. Did you think that worked though? Did you think it was maybe too many cooks?
I don't think there was too many. I think maybe the fact that there was 1 week too many showed. because I think the last week really just kind of dragged down. I think you had the same problem as when the Channel 4 series, where they'd have the last couple of weeks where all the big characters had gone, and they kept trying to do things to get them to argue and spice it up again, and it just wasn't happening for the most part. And so maybe shorter the better. I think it could have tightened it up a little bit and got rid of some of the duds on the cast, maybe.
And I think maybe as well, if they maybe scaled it down to, say, 12 or 13 housemates and used the money to hire people, let's say, like Jeremy or Megan, who are maybe some of the lesser stars.
Not bloody Kim Kardashian's best friend.
He actually had one of the biggest fees, actually, of something like, what was it, £250,000 for Jonathan?
Fuck off!
And he didn't get that money because he walked, so.
So there's justice done.
Oh, well, in that case, then, the world keeps spinning as we want.
Yeah, they're in the diary room going, no, please don't go.
Don't go. We need shit on Kim Kardashian.
We can save that money.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing we want to bring up as well is something that me and Paul sort of discussed about off the air, and that's also the whole vaudeville theme of this series, because we were talking about this. The Eye got released, and we saw the house, and we almost saw the sort of pantomime sort of quality to it. And they didn't do anything with it.
No. This is my... Everybody who's heard any of these shows with me on knows this is my big bone of contention with the Channel 5 series, is they have all this hype around the opening night twist, and then they do nothing with it. Don't even get me started when we get onto that whole locked task of like, okay, so what was the point?
I mean, even with Twisted Fairy Tale, though, there were like one or two tasks which sort of fit around that theme. There wasn't even that for this one.
Yeah, like the show has never been good at sticking to a theme of any sort, but when they do it and they promise all this stuff, as the Channel 5 series is the worst for, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and it lasts for about all of 2 days.
Because apparently Channel 5 treats his viewership like friggin' toddlers. Ooh, wait, we gotta do something. Jingle the keys, jingle the keys, jingle the keys.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Yeah. But we are going to move on, though, and we're going to go to launch night itself. And we sort of discussed this bits and pieces earlier on in the show, but we're going to be talking about the cast itself, 16 housemates. And something in particular which we want to discuss about is, if you remember Celebrity 15, there was a big deal made about the fact there was going to be no Towie contestants, no scripted reality contestants whatsoever. So the season on the whole turned out quite strong for it. For this year, though, they seem to go on their back. And if we saw the likes of Gemma, Scotty T, Megan, Jonathan, etc., all from scripted reality backgrounds.
I know, and what happened to that whole... Didn't they have a whole rule like a year ago where they weren't going to cast any of them?
There was a big rule about that, because I think what happened was that a lot of the scripted reality participants started cohering with each other before the show and started conspiring to get themselves into showmancers for airtime reasons, and there was big issues surrounding that.
Yeah, but then it lasted all of 1 year, and then this year half the cast was that, so...
Exactly, and it's something I want to bring up especially with you, Paul, because I know you're quite vocal about this. What's your opinion of people from other reality shows being cast for something like Big Brother?
This is one of the many gripes that I have with TV and modern TV as a whole, right? Sure, bring in another element from another show, fair dues. Good for you, right? When you bring in other elements, such as scripted reality, to something that is reality, which is called reality TV, it becomes... It's like a zombie virus. Once it gets bitten, it becomes the thing that they're trying to get away from. But then, they do this U-turn with a big massive with a rule saying, I'm quoting you here, no more scripted reality no more scripted reality people. And yet you've got Scotty T and the rest of the clone fodder that we've got on the show. And I think it sort of takes away the element of the reality sort of thing.
And I think the thing is as well is that because they have that scripted reality background and they're almost preordained to behave in a certain way, it means the naturalness that comes with these shows is lost.
Yeah, and I think, that's a natural thing of look, if you're going to do 2 of these series a year, which they shouldn't be doing, they were always scraping the bottom of the barrel. Now they're definitely scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's unfortunately what's going to happen is they need to cannibalize from this stuff. I think this show was the one that was kind of the weird meta reflection of that whole thing was Gemma's whole attitude towards it, where she was blatant that she was putting on a character in there, and would admit that she was putting on a character in there. But unfortunately, that works, and those people get the votes with the audience that they've got. So it's a case of, I think a lot of the facades drop after a couple of weeks. I mean, even to this case of Gemma, she even, would drop occasionally and say, yeah, I know what I'm doing and all this kind of stuff. So you can't keep it up. So it always comes out. So you can go in there being this character, whatever character, but in a couple of weeks, you're just like everybody else because you're an actor who doesn't know how to be yourself and be entertaining. You've not hired that person to be themselves. You've hired that person to be the character that they play. And, I mean, that happens with these shows all the time. They hire somebody from EastEnders and they expect them to be their EastEnders character, and then they're just them, and then the producer's surprised. Oh, you weren't like your EastEnders character? Yeah, because that was a written, scripted character. And I think the scripted reality is the weird sort of grey area with that, where it's kind of them, but kind of not them, and you're not sure, and...
No offense. No, why do I keep on saying no offense? Because this is Big Brother, and Big Brother can hold up on his little 2 feet. The point of Big Brother is to bring in people from completely different backgrounds, and it was originally an experiment to observe the behaviors of complete strangers over a period of time. But now you're just bringing in what I would like to call gossip column fodder. Right? Basically people who know a celebrity so they can get some juicy stories on them.
And the show has really started to embrace that sort of MTV trashy reality style format, I feel. It's very much in that sort of X on the Beach, Geordie Shore style.
Yeah, but then people are winning. So it's a case of they're the people that are making the money, so they're going to keep casting them. And that, so long as they keep winning, they will keep being cast. I personally would say I don't know one person from one of those shows who was a great character on one of these shows, but obviously the people voting disagree.
Exactly. And if they weren't people from scripted reality shows, they were also related or had some sort of relationship with somebody who was famous. So, of course, we had Nancy DeLolio, who had Sven-Goran Eriksson, David Guest and Liza Minnelli, Angie Bowie and David Bowie, of course, which, of course, David Bowie is going to get a lot of mentions on the show. So, of course, that's our launch night assessment, our cast assessment, and we go to our first launch night twist of the year, which is the box task. Now, this involves the first 8 housemates to enter the house all had the decision over which 2 of them would go into the so-called box, which was a sacrifice to try and win the housemates prized possessions, luxuries inside the house, and to win over the furniture as well. And arguably, this is also the first real dud task that we got this series.
This is, again, it's another example of just like the Armageddon task, just like every task like this they do. Why you spent all this money to do all of that for, oh, right, the next day we're just going to unlock the entire house. Why? Wait, make it some sort of, do something with it. You spent all this money to put wood all over the house and lock it up and do all this. Have them battle for each room. That's what you said when they were going in. They said they were going to battle for each room, not, oh, okay, we're bored of this now, we'll lock the entire house.
Something similar to what they did with Turf Wars in Series 13. That would have been perfect.
I just don't get it. Why spend all this money and do nothing with it? Is it just to get people to watch because they think there's going to be something interesting? But then you can't keep doing this. You can't keep swerving people and promising something and then not doing it. Because either people tune in and go, oh, let's get past this twist bullshit and get to the people, which is what generally happens, or they tune in and go, oh, I'm looking forward to see what they're doing with this, and then they do nothing, and then they're like, well, screw that, and turn off. And that's why you get the drop-off. It's a case, I go back to the best example of this was the Chantel one. They kept that going for a couple of days, and they did stuff with it, Just, if you're going to spend the money and the time to do this twist, do something with it. Don't just have it be a gimmick that's there for one night that goes nowhere.
And the thing is as well, is the other part of it, which I felt really failed as well, was obviously they did it so that I think it was John had to decide, oh, I'm going to have to choose someone to go in there. This is going to cause conflict. Who am I going to choose? Who am I going to make sacrifice the suitcases, etc. And he just decided to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of that was people pleasing on his part, because I felt, especially in the early stages, John was very self-conscious about how he was coming across on the show. But again, you create these moments for conflict, and then they just take the easy option and sacrifice themselves.
Of course they are, because nobody wants to have conflict, and there's so many examples on this show, especially, where the producers were like, oh, this will get them fighting, and sometimes they bit, and sometimes it just failed miserably.
Unless you're Farrah Abraham.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, less said about Farrah the better.
Farrah.
So we are gonna move on though from launch night, thankfully. And first off, we're going to our first real task, which had implications on the nominations as well. Housemates were forced to rank themselves on a series of different categories, and of those people who were chosen, Nancy, Winston, and Christina ended up being nominated. What was our opinions of this?
It was the easy options. It was the nominate the people, because the majority of it was a young crowd, so they were nominating the people who they didn't get on with. It was the first vote. Unless there's going to be somebody standing out who is somebody who's pissed everybody off, which ended up happening, of course, with Winston. It's just going to be the easy option. Look, we all know they make this shit up every morning. They're just like, okay, what are we going to do today? Okay, we'll do this today. They don't have any kind of plan.
And of those 3 nominees, there was one of those that really started to get himself on the wrong side of the house, and that was Winston. And in particular, we'll be talking about Winston's comments about homosexuals and about the ladies of the house. What was our views on this one then?
Look, here's the deal. What he said was wrong, but he was kind of thrown under the bus by having that brought. Like, it wasn't something he said in the house. He should be nominated for something he did in the house. He should have been evicted for something he did in the house. He was evicted because of something he said outside the house that was then brought in, which of course was going to come up. If somebody had asked him that question in the house, I'm sure it would have had the same response. But it was another case of the producers throwing somebody under the bus to cause cheap drama.
Because what was also noticeable about that, though, is that a lot of the moments, because they always do this sort of icebreaker task where they have to reveal something about themselves. And most of the time, yeah, there is something a little bit scandalous about it, but on the whole, it's treated quite lightly. And housemates are giggling about it and said, oh, I can't believe I did that when I was younger, etc. And yet Winston has something chosen for him, which is quite provocative. And whilst I don't agree with Winston's politics and I don't agree with Winston as a person,
no,
I do feel he was made a bit of a scapegoat there.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, what he said was wrong, and the reaction to that should have been, look, I said that, they twisted my words, and he should have backed out of it. Instead he said, yeah, absolutely, I said that. So at the same time, it's like, okay, you're willing to lie in the bed, which I respect, that you're willing to stick up with your values, but your values are wrong. So if you're going to be that behind a comment like that, if you're going to say, yes, totally, that was exactly what I said, then what was going to happen?
And I felt the whole attitude towards the show surrounding that was also quite interesting as well, because one of the things I always remembered about Big Brother, especially during the golden era of the show, was that, yes, we had people in there who had controversial opinions, who had maybe some outdated views, but the whole premise of the show, and something we enjoyed, was that the show allowed those opinions to be viewed, and it was up to the audience to decide whether or not they agree with them or disagree with them, and basically make the declarations through the vote. And the way I felt Winston was treated here, especially with the way the eviction format was twisted, it was almost to make an example to say, no, that is the wrong way. That is not how you could behave in this day and age, which felt almost seemed to go against what the show stood for.
Almost like he was cast to be the villain, and then when he wasn't playing up to that role, they basically said, oh, let's tell them what he said to make him the villain.
Yes, because certainly before then there was not much that really made Winston.
I'm sure he would have been nominated just for how he was kind of perving on the women, but at the same time, it was. I think they exaggerated a lot about that, especially Gemma.
But we are going to go to that eviction, and of course, as mentioned before, it was Nancy, Winston, and Christina who were nominated. Of course, Christina ends up being saved, which ends up sort of backfiring on them, considering how dull a character she ends up being.
Well, I think she had the didn't she? Wasn't this just before the vote when she came out and said that she was pregnant and all this stuff, so I'm sure she had some goodwill from that. Of course, people are fans of her other show, and let's be honest, if it had been vote to evict, it would have been Winston. If it was vote to save, it would have been Winston. So.
And what we essentially get, however, is a switch in the eviction format so that the bottom two in the vote end up going to a house vote. Now, it's almost pretty unanimous. Of course, Winston said all these bad things to the women, said all these comments about homophobia, and ends up leaving in a 13-1 vote, Jeremy being the only person to vote for Nancy. And that in itself sort of annoyed me a little bit, go off on a bit of a tangent, that Winston says all these awful, horrible things about homophobia, etc. and yet Jeremy wants to get rid of someone who spilt his drink.
Oh, for God's sake.
I respected him for that, just because I respected him for standing his ground. A lot of weaker people would have changed to follow the group mentality, but he stuck with the person he originally voted for. He didn't change his mind based on he wasn't a sheep, and that I respected him for that.
One of the things I will say though is, why do you think that change in eviction format happened? Because I've heard a lot of theories surrounding this, etc. And there's almost two schools of thought seem to go. The first one is that Winston had the most votes to save over Nancy and would have stayed in the house if he kept the vote going. So they twisted it to make sure he went. And the other one was simply that he had the least votes, but they just wanted to make an example out of him.
They maybe had a backlash about the whole thing, where the papers were probably railing on them, and the people online were probably railing on them for casting somebody who had these political views. So they felt like, okay, he's served his purpose, he's got us the attention for being that guy, now we can get rid of him. Oh crap, he might be saved. If he stays in there, it might cause even more uproar and keep having us having bad press, so let's find a way to get rid of him. This show is sometimes a magnifying glass for that, but everybody gets offended about everything these days. Winston's comments were especially like he deserved to be railed for them, but there are other things where I'm just like, oh, get lost, people.
So of course Winston ends up being evicted. Not really a major loss to the show. He wasn't really strong enough to be a good antagonistic figure. It was almost quite similar in the sort of Evander Holyfield mold, where he was just a bit of a dud. He was just this lazy dud with outdated opinions and not a loss to the show at all, to be honest.
If he had been the character he was during his speeches the entire time, maybe that would have been fun. But
yeah. So we'll move away from Winston and we'll move on to the talent show task, which was one of the very few light-hearted moments I felt this series had.
Until later on, yeah.
Where do we stand on this then?
Remind me, it was a long time ago.
Yes. Well, I believe David Guest was the producer of the show. And
yes, okay, yes. And that was where we first saw Angry Tiffany, who you say anything to her in any way and she will go off on one. And in this case, it was Angie. And we basically got to see those two's real characters come out for the first time that we'd see for the rest of their time in the house, which was Tiffany blows up at nothing and Angie threatens to leave.
Yeah. And I think you just mentioned there, I think Angie is a really underappreciated character on the show, and this was probably our first real breakout moment of the series.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, when, David's begging her to help him, and she looks at the paper and goes, "Oh, you'll be fine." Yeah, and she was great as a character. It's a shame that she just gave it up so easily.
So the talent task takes place. Jonathan's one of the judges as well. Comes out with quite a few one-liners, which really took me by surprise there. Stephanie ends up winning that, but that ends up completely being overshadowed by what happens the day afterwards, where unfortunately Angie is called to the diary room and gets told that unfortunately her ex-husband David Bowie has unfortunately passed away. She gets told about the news, and of course she comes out the diary room and comes over to Tiffany and says, "Tiffany, I'm gonna have to tell you something. I can't keep it to myself. You're gonna have to listen to this, okay? And promise you're not gonna tell anyone else. David's dead." And Tiffany's just distraught. She's horrified at hearing this news. She's crying. She's screaming all over the place, obviously attracting the attention of all the other housemates. Unfortunately, we end up finding out Tiffany thinks it's David Guest, who hasn't been feeling very well. He's the one who has died. So Tiffany's running around the diary room, screaming her head off, runs into the bedroom, crying at David's death. It's honestly one of the funniest moments in Big Brother history. A very black humour, but very funny.
Yeah.
Why?
It was incredible. It was one of those things where you went from feeling sorry for Angie and you tuned in to go, I wonder how they're going to handle this. And she got informed and then she decided to stay in the house, at least for the time being. It may have ended up contributing as to why she left this whole thing. But, but what, obviously you went from feeling sorry for her when, she called in David and she called in, I can't think of his name right now. Paul? No. John, there we go.
Yes.
She called them in, she told them, and it was all very sad and all this kind of stuff. And but then it quickly went from that to what proceeded to be just like, if you wrote this for an episode of Fawlty Towers, it couldn't have gone better. It was like an episode of Fawlty Towers. It was like a comedy show. It just was one chain reaction after another of like, oh my god, oh my, and then you started to realise because her whole thing was, I don't want to tell anybody, keep it quiet. And she was like, oh my god, she was obviously just Tiffany, she was hysterical. She goes, I'm going to go and tell everybody. And then Angie's there on the sofa going, oh god, no. Great. Of course, she doesn't understand exactly what's happened. She's going wailing down the garden going, oh my god, David's dead. And they go and check to see whether he is dead in the bed, which you think... You're on a television show with an omnipresent producers. You think they would have announced that over the PA if somebody in the house was dead?
And it's reactions of everybody else in the show as well that makes it as well. I mean, it's like Darren Day in the diary room, and he said, like, I lifted up the cover, and there was this brief moment where I actually did think he was dead.
It was ridiculous. It was amazing in every way. Then it turned dark again when afterwards Tiffany in her pride, later on Tiffany became a fantastic character. This was the only time where I was really against Tiffany, because she should have gone, oh damn, that was a mistake, I'm so sorry for your loss and all this stuff, which she did do later. But at this point she was like, I ain't apologise to that old bitch, it was her fault. And oh my god. It went quite dark again. The whole house turned on her for it, and it turned into a whole thing. It was just a series of you can't write stuff any better than that. That was just an incredible explosion of events that will never be recreated. Of just like, you took this huge celebrity death, and you're like, usually you tune into these things to see what the chain reaction of it will be, and it's kind of like, oh, that's sad, moving on. But to see this result from it, oh my god.
Moving it on to more of a serious subject, though, do you think that Channel 5 made the right decision in telling Angie anyway, and sort of exploiting David's passing for ratings?
Of course they told... If they had to tell her, they're not going to not tell her. Christ almighty. I don't think they exploited his death for ratings. They did not show the moment that she was told. She was told off camera in another room. She was the one who brought it up and made it into a thing when she was back on camera. It was not Channel 5 trying to exploit her for ratings. It was her deciding to remain in the house. And obviously if she was going to remain in the house for that news, that was going to come up. Everything else that happened was all Angie's doing, not the producers.
I had a little hint of them exploiting David Bowie's death, but to be honest, dear God, how can you saw the man walk around before. How the fuck did you mistake that for fucking...
And how do you think that they wouldn't go, this is Big Brother, by the way, David is dead. Like you think they would have mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, for God's sake, think through, woman. David's dead. Oh God.
Yeah. Tiffany's explosion went from being, what the hell, to, oh my God, that's hilarious, to, oh no. And it just went from, oh no. But for the moment, until finally she calmed down and realised what she'd done, and then she sucked her pride up and finally went back on it. But that was the only time that I was ever against Tiffany, 100%.
It was like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
It was ridiculous.
And what sort of almost gets overlooked on this is, unfortunately, on the same day, we also lose Jonathan from the show.
Yeah, he just kind of was like, I'm claustrophobic, so I'm walking out. It's like, you signed up for this show. You knew what this show was. Fuck off. Don't hit out the door, hit you on the way out.
Do you think that was just an excuse from his part? Do you think he just wanted to take the money and run?
Well, he wasn't going to take the money because you don't get paid your full feed if you walk. I'm pretty sure he got it there, realised it wasn't quite what he thought it would be, and was like, no, done. So, whatever, go back to your amazing Hollywood life and being best friends with even more trash.
I have to be honest, though, I was actually almost taken a bit surprised by Jonathan. I came in with these expectations, obviously, because of who he was and because of his lifestyle, just thinking, oh, God, this guy's just going to be obnoxious and terrible. He was quite witty, I felt. He had some funny lines, and I never thought he was going to be long-term, and I never would have put him as one of my favourites, but compared to those expectations I did have of him, I was quite pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, he was a nice enough guy. He was fine. I have a thing against people who go to the diary room in 5 minutes and threaten to leave over stupid reasons. I mean, you knew the show that you were signing up for. If you can't handle it, fuck off. If you're claustrophobic, you don't sign up for a show where you're basically in prison. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, pretty much.
And from one of the highest paid celebrities, we also go to one of the lowest. Now, this is where I've titled this segment Megan goes insane. Now, this is a segment of arguments and over-the-top behaviour that Megan got herself into during these next couple of days. One of them involving a rant over mashed potato, and then her diary room screaming match.
Wow. Dear Lord. What? Obviously, she was drunk. She had some boiled up rage about John. She had some boiled up rage about Tiffany, about a couple of other things. But then she got drunk, and then, for no particular reason, I think over cleaning initially, she went from 1 to 100 and just went absolutely ballistic, yelling at everybody, almost getting into a fight with Tiffany. She got carried out of the room, refused to go to the diary room, was yelling at everybody about how bad John was because he told her to clean up. So of course, he's a motherfucker, and now he's playing us all, and he's game playing. He's like, he just told you to. Maybe we'll have a talk tomorrow about dishes. She's like, I don't want to. No, you're manipulating me. Don't tell me to clean my stuff up. And she used that as an excuse to rail all the things that she'd been thinking in her mind about him. But then, of course, because she was drunk, there was no filter. And like literally, it was. You can't even describe how it was over nothing it was to how far she went, to the point she was yelling at everybody and pissing everybody off, and then she got called to the diary room and was hitting the cameras and security had to be called in. It was something else.
And does it come as a surprise to anybody that Megan quit anger management lessons to go on the show?
No.
Yeah.
And I love that Stephanie was in the diary room the whole time. She was like, I'm trying to leave over her old boyfriend situation, which I'm sure we'll get to soon. So she was like saying she was and ahhing in the diary room, and then it's like, oh, we need the diary room right now. So she missed the whole thing.
Honestly, I completely forgot about that part about how Stephanie was just completely letting out her heart to Big Brother and to the audience, and they were just like, we need you out, just get out, please, just go away. We need to sort out Megan quickly.
You can just imagine, they just go all Guantanamo Bay. Will Megan go to the diary room, please? And just suddenly out of nowhere, black bag, and off he went.
Well, they kept calling her. She wouldn't go. She went from every different room in the house, shouting at pretty much every single person.
Okay, now that's something. Now that would be even more hilarious. A cartoon figure of just a man with a black bag just following her around.
This series could almost be titled Asbo Teens, because there was a lot of this going on where it was the kids going crazy and like security had to be called in twice. You've never seen security on this show. We had it twice on this one.
Exactly. And as much as I do dislike a lot of those scripted reality participants, you look at those rants from Megan and you could understand why she was cast.
Yeah, but the show she was from wasn't a scripted one, was it? It was more of a kind of come dine with me, but with sex.
Channel 4, get on with this now. Get on this now. Get on this now.
She's famous because she was entertaining somebody's ex, apparently.
And in the midst of all these arguments and conflicts and misunderstandings, we also have an eviction to get to, where it's Angie versus Gemma versus Jeremy versus Nancy versus Stephanie. And as much as many people on the internet forums wanted Jeremy to go, probably because he was a straight attractive male, it ends up being Nancy that ends up leaving. And I felt this was a big mistake on my part because, yeah, Nancy maybe wasn't the most prominent character on the show, and arguably she was in the firing line because of the whole Winston vote the week before. But I really missed her. I felt the show really missed something once Nancy left because I felt she was a great character.
She offered more than Christina did, and especially when Angie walked out the next day, it's like, well, what was the point of that?
Well, let's be honest, the Shetland pony they brought in for Gemma did more than Christina.
Hang on, what?
We'll get to that later, Paul, don't worry. One of the things I quite liked about Nancy, though, and it was sort of like touched on launch night, is that in a strange way, I liked the fact she'd never watched Big Brother before. She was completely oblivious to the whole concept and how the show worked. And I felt that when the show's been on as long as it is, there's almost a cynicalness about it and people know how to behave to try and win over the audience or the housemates. And yet, with Nancy, because she was so oblivious, there was a naturalness to her. There was a naturalness to her behaviour. She wasn't swayed by any preconceptions.
Basically, what anyone else would have done if they found out, if they didn't watch a show like this in a long time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I did love Nancy, and I felt she was a character for me who, if she'd maybe been in a civilian version and had longer time to build, I think the public would have really warmed to her. But
Yeah.
because of the way the celebrity version works, where it's an eviction nearly every 3 days, she really didn't have the time to build up that sort of fan base. And
Well, that and the fact that she was overshadowed by these insane characters and these insane things that were happening, it was like they just didn't have time to show her because somebody was going crazy pretty much every single day.
And I mean, Nancy's a big character as well. You watch her on a lot of the other reality shows she's done. She is a big, prominent personality.
Yeah, this second week was pretty much the peak of the show. This was where literally every day something crazy was happening. It was getting to the point of like, holy cow, what the hell is in the water in there?
So, of course, we move on to eviction process number 3. Now, of course, because the evictions take place on such a regular basis, they don't have time to do a full-on nomination process because of the way the celebrity version works. So what happens is that the people who survived the eviction vote, which in this case was Angie, Gemma, Jeremy, and Stephanie, all end up casting a killer nomination between them, with Christina, John, Tiffany, and Daniela all being nominated respectively. One of the things I want to bring up, though, is sort of like something that really wound up a lot of the internet forums, which was Jeremy's nomination choices up until that point. Because, of course, he ended up nominating Nancy first week as part of his own killer nomination. Then it was Nancy and Angie who ended up being nominated in the first House vote. And then he ends up nominating Tiffany again. And if you think about that, Nancy, Angie, and Tiffany, all from the same person. He wasn't endearing himself to the audience at all there.
I think Tiffany was justified. I think Angie was justified. Early on, Nancy, I don't know what his problem was with her. I think it was just a case of she's the older lady who's telling me what to do, kind of thing. I think this is going to be a theme as we get towards when we're going to talk about that. Is I quite liked Jeremy and Stephanie, and I overall thought they were a good part of the show. Well, maybe not always the most entertaining, but they were nice enough people, and I liked them.
Yes.
And I kind of have been a defender of theirs. And I mean, it turned towards the end of the show where a lot of people got on board with it because of the whole showman storyline. But I liked them both from the start. They had their ups and downs, but I think they were genuinely nice people. And it was nice to have two normal people in there amongst these insane characters.
I completely share the sentiment. And I think as well, they weren't an exhausting showmans in the way that someone like John James and Josie were.
No, and their storyline had enough drama and entertainment to make it fun rather than just cover subtitles.
Yes. Next up, though, we're going to be talking to one of the more divisive subjects that we're going to be talking about, and it's something which, to be honest, though, I have been looking forward to, which is Gemma Collins' behaviour in that show, and it's specifically Gemma's diva behaviour.
You're in the reality world, you know exactly what this show is, and you refuse to do any task. You have breakdowns about doing tasks, you say that you're not doing it whenever you don't feel like it, you say, oh, I'll give them 10 minutes and then I'll give you entertainment. Basically she feels like she was cast as the star of the show, and she is, she's going to be GC, not Gemma Collins. She's going to be her character, and she's going to be the best thing on the show, and she's going to provide entertainment for it by winding everybody up and starting arguments and not participating in tasks because she doesn't feel like it, because she feels like she's above all that, and she deserves to have curlers in the house, and she deserves to have blow dries in the house because that's the kind of things that she expects because she is a sort of certain status. She's a trashy reality star who thinks that she is the biggest star in the world, and she deserves this and she deserves that. She's got such an incentive entitlement. Her diva behaviour turned to be completely off from her. And I don't care what she provides to the show. It was all fake, so it's all a moot point for me, really.
If I could give you a medal for saying that, I would. I completely agree 100%. For me, the whole way that Gemma was treated in that show really defines for me one of the big differences between I'm a Celebrity and other reality shows of that ilk and Big Brother. Which was, of course, if you remember, Gemma did I'm a Celebrity a couple of years ago, had the same sort of diva, over-the-top behaviour. I'm not going to do the tasks, I'm not going to try this. But instead, the production team just said, okay, if you're not going to try, if you're not going to contribute to the show, we're not going to bother. Instead, Big Brother, whether it's because of a star power name, whether it's because they were trying to attract a Towie audience, instead pandered to her and gave her everything that she wanted. And as a viewer who likes to see sort of impartiality, who likes to see almost justice as it were prevail, it really frustrated me to have somebody so undeserving being given so much off the back of so little. Because I don't know about you, but for me personally, I just didn't find Gemma entertaining. I didn't think the whole diva character worked for me. I didn't think there was a fun factor about it. She didn't really work as a sort of love-to-hate baddie because she never felt she was going to get the comeuppance. It was a really frustrating character arc.
And listening to her, you'd think Essex was Hollywood. It's like, oh, Essex, we expect this, and Essex was about that. Like, you're not Pamela Anderson, love. You're from a trashy reality show that about half or a quarter of the audience who watch this show watch. You're not famous.
As much as we do dislike Gemma, however, she did play a big part, however, in our next discussion topic, which was Stephanie blowing up over her and Gemma. Of course, they had the argument in bedroom, and of course, Stephanie ends up being pulled over into one of the rooms, one of the spare rooms that they held up, and goes on that famous Lion King rant.
Oh boy. Yeah, this was kind of interweaved with the Daniela situation in the case of Daniela said that thing, oh, at least I'll have a boyfriend when I leave here and all that kind of stuff, and that's sort of caused their problems. So her and Gemma kind of teamed up against Stephanie, and it led to this whole situation. Right. Here's my take on this whole thing. At the start of the show, where she was going back and forth, she wanted to have her cake and eat it. She wanted to flirt with a guy in the house and kind of be with somebody in the house, but at the same time thought that she was going to go out to be with a boyfriend. She was delusional about that. She thought that, she thought that she could have both for some reason. And then when people called her out on it, she went mental and goes, "Oh, please don't talk about it, because then he'll know about it, and then he'll break up with me." No, he'll break up with you because of what you've done, love. He was already gone at that point. And later, as I said, I liked Jeremy and Stephanie. I liked them overall. Later on, when she just outright just was like, "No, right, okay, I'm not now single, and if me and Jeremy get together, that's what I want." Fair enough. That was what... If she had done that from the start, nobody would have had any problems with her. And the reason she became a villain is because of her denial. I like Stephanie overall, but she was a very confused young girl, and these early stages where she wanted to have both, and she thought that she was still going to have a boyfriend even though she was blatantly getting it on with the guy in the house, that was where it was a problem for people. And it was a problem for me, and I got mad with her watching just admit it, and eventually she did admit it. She did let herself know. She came fully out. Whether, the whole thing about he treated me wrong and all this, whether that's right or wrong, we don't know. He's not there to defend himself. But at the end of the day, I liked Stephanie after she admitted what she was doing was wrong. Early on, I was frustrated with her, but still liked her as a person.
Like, don't get me wrong, I can't forgive Stephanie for any of her behaviour. I think that somebody cheating on their boyfriend on television is one of the worst things you can do. But one of the things I found quite interesting about it, though, was the reaction of the audience to it. Because
yep. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Remember a certain somebody called Preston who went in there with a girlfriend, and people were wanting him both times to leave his girlfriend for Chantel, because that was the person on the show. If it had been a guy, if it had been Jeremy with a girlfriend, they would have absolutely not turned on him the way they turned on Stephanie. They turned on her because she's a girl, and the majority of the audience are bitchy women.
Well, the other example I can think of is Daly and Hazel. Of course, Daly had the girlfriend going in, and he ended up cheating on her with Hazel, and yet she ended up being the villain in that regard. It's almost like, when it comes to relationships in this show, women can't seem to win. Because
the majority of the audience are women, and for some reason, if you're a good-looking guy, you're God, and you can do no wrong, and it's okay to sleep around. It's the same thing as in our society. If a guy sleeps with 1,000 women, he's a hero. If a woman sleeps with 1,000 men, she's a slag. It's a problem with our society, and it's reflected in this show.
One of the things I will say about that whole Lion King rant, though, which I found was quite funny, it sort of symbolises how much was happening, was the room they actually put Stephanie in was just a spare room. It was the task room, because the normal spare room was being used by David Guest because he was ill. So they had
Why do I just, for some odd reason, I can just see Elton John saying, "Can you feel fuck this noise?"
If they played that over a video package for this, that would have been amazing. Yeah, you had David sick in one room, you had her in the task room in this camping bed, yelling at the top of her lungs. I guess she was drunk as well about, "No, let me out of here, I'm going to punch Gemma Collins in the face." It got to the point of ridiculousness, and again, it was her with the alcohol mixed in, reacting against herself, but because Gemma's the one to point it out, the anger was directed at Gemma. I don't like Gemma, but and I don't like that she was the one who was like, I'm going to be Mrs. Right that sticks up for this because I am the hero. Like, that annoyed me, but at the same time, somebody had to say that to her, and she flew off the handle every time somebody did.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what would have happened if they had Stephanie in that room, David obviously in his ailing room. What do you think they would have done if Megan had actually gone on another one of those rants? Where would you put her?
Well, she was on a final warning. I think she would have been thrown out.
They'll just get a cardboard box they found in storage and just put her in it. You've been naughty. No more coverage for you. You're in cardboard box now. Calm down.
That's actually a really accurate impression of Megan.
Hey! I got something right there.
Pretty much. Just add duck lips.
Of course, after that whole happens, however, of course, we sort of touched on it there. David Guest was obviously in his room. He'd been ailing. He'd been having the flu for a long time. And unfortunately, David makes the decision, or maybe production told him to decide to leave the house, which I know David Guest obviously was ill and obviously wasn't performing to the best of his abilities. But when he was in there, I thought he was a great housemate.
He was. It was a shame he had to go. Now, he was on a bit on the side a couple of days later, and he seemed fine. So a lot of people got sick in there, so you think there was just a cold virus going round in the house, and because he was an older gentleman, he just couldn't kick it.
But I think the real crime is that obviously the UK version of the show doesn't really do returning players as much as what they do on like the North American versions of the show. So my fear is that someone like David Guest, who has so much potential to be a great housemaid, is never going to be able to have a chance again. And I think if there was one chance to basically rectify a wrong and have somebody have a second chance, I think David going in Celebrity 18 in the summer would be right up there.
Yeah. He was a great housemate, and it's a shame of what happened, but
because he's almost the thing with David is he's almost one of those sort of old school reality TV contestants, sort of in the same mold as say like a Janice Dickinson or a Gary Busey, where the appeal of him isn't so much the arguments or the over the top shouting, it's the fact there's something so bizarrely compelling about him. They had a fantastic charisma. It was about their character and who they are as a person that made them entertaining, not being bitches or arguing with everybody every day. I mean, David Guest is up there as one of my favourite I'm a Celebrity contestants ever, and I think if he'd even shown a half of that, which I think he did, he would have been great. And it's such a shame that somebody who I think could have been a contender to win had to go so early.
He should play Penguin in the new Batman films, I think.
Should do, yes, definitely.
He's got the coat and the hair.
But we end up getting a double blow, however, because a couple of days after David ends up leaving, we end up losing Angie Bowie as well. But of course, Angie's style, she goes out with a bang.
This came across to me as, and I know this may be me being a bit cynical, this came across to me as, oh, look, David used that as his excuse to leave, so I'll use the same excuse. She seemed fine, she wasn't ill, she just wanted out of there, but didn't want to admit that she wanted to walk, so she used the illness that David had as an excuse for herself to leave, I think.
I totally agree, to be honest. I think Angie did want to go, but certainly I think the whole illness thing was just complete ruse, in my opinion.
Because maybe you get more money if you leave as opposed to walk? Possibly.
But what about her behaviour before then, though? When she was smacking on the diary room door, when she was smacking on the fire exit disc, saying, "Let me out, I want to go."
She was another person who was just crazy. Like, in the daytime, she was this nice, kind, elderly woman, and at night, she became this raging Hulk.
What, you mean a David Bowie inspired Hulk woman?
Yeah, like that. She just would go crazy. At night, she just was like, fuck off, get away from me. But, if you got her wound up, good God, do not make that woman angry. You don't like her when she's angry.
You might say Aladdin insane.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm here all week. That was bad. I'm sorry. I apologise for that one.
I would just really buckle if they just started playing some of David Bowie's songs while she was freaking out. You know, the fact that you just hear ground control to Major Tom in the background while she's going, yeah, fuck it, yeah.
I'm sure they did that on Shit on the Side, but I don't watch that anymore. So
no.
Aw, damn it.
But of course, we lose Angie, and again, I feel that Angie's eviction more than anything else. Obviously, we'd lost David, and obviously we lost Nancy the week before then. But this is really, for my opinion, where the boot order starts to really make the show suffer, in my opinion. To lose so many big characters early on, and to be left with almost a younger generation controlling things, whether it's Stephanie, Gemma, Jeremy, etc. I felt the show really suffered. And I mean, I'm one of those people who sort of watches Big Brother for almost the more complex characters of the show. And yet I felt with the younger generation, yeah, they were still causing controversy and conflict, but there was no depth to it.
Tiffany was a great character, and there were still some great characters in there, but they had nobody to play off.
No.
It's kind of like what would happen if, going back to the Batman analogy, what if Batman died and Joker was just left in Gotham on his own? He wouldn't be half as entertaining, you know what I mean?
And of course, we end up moving on to our next eviction. All these things didn't happening. We end up losing 3 housemates in the space of 3 days because, of course, the eviction takes place then, and it's Christina, John, Tiffany, and Danielle who end up being nominated. And it's no surprise, Christina's a goner.
Yeah, I think the votes this series were some of the best vote to save. I think the right people went when the votes were taken into account, and the strong characters were kept. Unfortunately, as I said, some of the strong characters took themselves out of the game.
Certainly so. And one of those people who wasn't a strong character, however, was Christina. Because I have to be honest, if you had to look at who was the least beneficial contestant to the series, I think Christina would have to be up there. I mean,
she announced that she was pregnant, and she washed some dishes, and she danced.
And I watched Strictly Come Dancing, and I know there was the whole scandal about her and Ben Cohen as well. She basically left her husband to go with Ben Cohen, and there was a whole big thing about that on Strictly. That was basically her selling point on the show, but it showed again once she basically lost that storyline, she lost that reason to be in there. There was nothing there. She was a nice enough girl, but that was it.
It does seem like that, but mind you, when your highlight is dancing, then doing dishes, you just filler, really.
And especially when you've got characters in there that are going so insane, like Megan, like Stephanie, like Angie, Tiffany. You just left with these normal people just standing there going, what the fuck have I signed up for? And that was pretty much all some of the people were good for.
I mean, Christina might have worked if she was on like one of the old school Channel 4 series, like a Celebrity 3 or a Celebrity 4, but with the direction that the Celebrity franchise has taken in recent years, she was just such an outdated, antiquated character. So we move on from Christina and we move on to eviction process number 4, and we're going to be starting off with the just go along with it task, where basically it's almost a continuation of the whole just say yes tasks that they've done nearly every other series of the show. The highlight of this, however, was Christopher and Tiffany in the zoo task.
This was fun. This was an excuse to get them doing some stuff and going along with some stuff that made them uncomfortable and made them do stupid shit. I mean, there's some tasks that it's just like, oh, they're just going to eat nasty stuff again and be sick again, and that's just kind of boring to me. There's a reason. That's kind of one of the reasons I don't really watch I'm a Celebrity, because that just doesn't entertain me. But these tasks where it's like, yeah, you've just here there's a baby here that you've got to take care of the rest of the day. Just say yes to it. Here you go. But no, and then obviously the zoo task obviously was the whole thing where they were having animals put on them, and they're trying to act like they were happy-go-lucky presenters, but they were like, no, not doing it, no.
I have to say though, in one of the few Christopher Maloney moments I loved, his face when he saw the snake.
Yeah, brilliant. As he's trying to read off the teleprompter.
And of course, as part of that whole task, we also end up having a public vote where the viewers were chosen their 2 least popular housemates, which end up being Gemma and John. Now, as part of their punishment, they're supposed to be sent to a jail. And of course, quelle surprise, Gemma refuses to do so.
Mm-hmm. And all the housemates bowed down before the mighty Gemma and sacrificed the task so that she could win.
Oh, please say they got a big, massive hat for her. I want to see a big, massive hat.
She wouldn't even get in the jail just to get out, because...
And she's a bitch.
She's too good for playing along with the show that she signed up for.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, and I mean, look, I'm not one of those people who likes to be prim and proper about the franchise, and I'm not one of those digital spy types that wanted to go be exactly the same as it was back in 2002 when the show was great, etc. But when you have that much blatant lack of disregard for the process, why are you there?
And why are you being paid to do a job that you're not doing?
Exactly. I mean, Gemma should have had a fee taken off it, because She was in there to take part in tasks and to be a Big Brother housemate, and she wasn't doing that. Because she left about 4 times as well, because she just kept breaking out. So we'll get onto it when we obviously discuss Gemma in a bit more detail, but honestly, she's up there as one of my bottom 10 housemates ever.
I just, yeah. I don't think she's a bad person necessarily. Like she's not a Farrah Abraham by any stretch, but she's got that thing about her where she thinks that the world owes her everything.
It's entitlement, complete and utter entitlement. But she is, however, part of the next eviction. Of course, it's a massive eviction, this one. It's Daniela versus Gemma, Jeremy, John, Megan, Stephanie, Tiffany. Deep breath. And it's Megan who ends up going there. And I think that if there was an eviction result, which I think maybe went the wrong way, I think it was this one. Because I did like Megan, and I thought she did bring something to the show. Arguably, I would have probably have seen Jeremy go instead, but what's our opinion of Megan?
I think she had a lot more to give. It was one of those things of, was she ever going to get to that level that she did? Could she ever top that rant that she had? Probably not. All that was probably going to come from her was her and Scotty T were probably going to end up doing something, and yeah.
And I think as well, I think another thing which sort of hurt Megan as well is if you look at the characters in that eviction, of course, obviously Gemma was doing her old diva antics, Tiffany was being fantastic, Stephanie and Jeremy were the showmans, John was still this almost omnipresent figure. Arguably, apart from Daniela, Megan didn't really have that sort of storyline.
I do think Daniela should have gone. Look, Daniela is a wreck, and I kind of, to a level, feel sorry for her, but she just came across as so bitter and nasty for a lot of the show, especially towards Stephanie. And she was just, again, when the slightest thing would just set her off, and she'd just turn into this wreck of a woman, and you could tell how damaged she is. I don't know. I almost, it wasn't a sense of disliking her; it was a sense of pitying her for the most part.
In a way, Daniela sort of reminded me of like a darker version of Kerry Katona. Very sort of backgrounds.
And she's obviously got this past that she tried to get away from, but she just ended up being this crying mess, this wreck in the house and all of it was down to a comment she made towards Stephanie, and then as soon as Stephanie started biting back, which, as I say, I like Stephanie overall, but there were times that she went too far with certain things, or got mad about nominations. It's like, Jesus Christ, nominations are part of the process, get over it, and that sort of stoked the fires. But the way Daniela reacted, her and the egging on of course, Gemma's behaviour and worshipping the statue of Gemma, I think really hurt Daniela as well. I think she should have gone definitely over Megan. Although the best part of this entire eviction was Tiffany's diary entry right afterwards, where she said, "I'm going to be there with Scotty T with open arms and open lips and open legs." This was the moment where Tiffany went from being, wow, she's entertaining, but she's a bitch, to, wow, she's just an incredibly entertaining character. Her diary entries from this point onwards kind of became almost kind of like Nikki Graham levels of what the hell is she going to say next.
You certainly saw, and I think that I know there's a lot of people who maybe question why Big Brother's still on the air, why do people still get invested in it. I think Tiffany's one of those examples of why. Because you still get these great characters coming through, and I mean, she's going to go down as one of the celebrity Big Brother greats.
She was great. I think there was something about Tiffany where, and it wasn't fake, and you could tell it wasn't fake. Like, that was her. Like, to the point of where she'd be on, when she was outside, and Gemma's, one of the best parts of Gemma was her relationship with Tiffany, I think, at times, where she was like, just go make a cup of tea for people, that means so much to people, and you just see Tiffany's honest, sort of innocent face almost, like, oh, they do? And then she went in and asked whether she could help wash up and stuff, and it was just this great, genuine character, where that character, that diva, was her. It wasn't any kind of act like it was for Gemma. That was just who she was, and she was great at being who she was. Whether you agree with her values or not, she was incredibly entertaining. She was the other side. Gemma thought she was a diva. Tiffany was a diva.
But Tiffany was a diva in an entertaining way. Tiffany was in that sort of Gina Rio mold of diva.
Yeah.
Rather than the Gemma Collins entitled bitch.
And she went along with all the tasks and played along and if she got given a secret mission, she did it all to make it the best, most entertaining task that she could.
I love how we've ended up talking for like 5 minutes about Tiffany Pollard here during a Megan eviction.
Well, talked about Megan's highlight moment other than the showman, so.
Pretty much, yeah. So that means we're going to have to move on then. And we're going to be moving on to one of the more controversial moments, especially if you're on the forums. And this is the Forgotten Theatre and Gemma Collins winning, in inverted commas, immunity. Because, I mean, obviously I don't take the show as seriously as what a lot of other people do. But this was just farcical. I mean,
they did choose their own pillars, and it was live. So, again, I'm going to come down the side of just because they were allowed to pick their own pillars, I would say, unless there was a way to make it so that the masks could change after they'd pick their pillars, then I'd agree. But from what appeared in the mechanism, it looked like it was just random. I'd like to think it was anyway.
Well, the story was that the way that those sort of mechanisms work, and it was the main reason why the task was taking so long, was that basically underneath the floor they could actually feed the masks through. So once you knew that Gemma was in there, they could manage to do it that way.
If it was that, then yeah, totally.
Because I just found it so funny though, because there was this whole element of this is complete lottery, we don't know who's going to win, etc. And yet people were turning the handles the wrong way, and it was still popping up. Jeremy's handle actually broke off, and it still popped up.
Yeah. So I mean, in that case, if it was a case that they gave her it as a rigged thing, it's par for the course for this production, isn't it? At this point.
I mean, yeah. If the key is for a show like that, just don't take it seriously. And I mean, if you are one of those people that do take the show seriously, all good to you. But if you didn't, if you just treated it as fun,
yeah,
it's hilarious.
And look, here's the bottom line: is if you have more than 2 brain cells, which the production team obviously think you only have 1, but if you only have 2, you can figure out what the production team are doing, and you can see where they're trying to manipulate it, and it's almost becomes funny where you can see the production team are like, oh, they're not arguing, let's do a task where we play them all their comments they said about each other to get them arguing, and then when it just fails miserably, it's quite entertaining to see how desperate production gets sometimes to try and cause fake drama because the ratings are dropping.
One of the things I would have quite liked to have seen, one of the almost alternatives to that task, is to have them keep turning it, but have nothing pop up, and basically the winner is the person who keeps going the longest.
Or just the middle finger comes up.
Of course, as part of the Forgotten Theatre task as well, we had Gemma winning the immunity. Stephanie and Darren also ended up immune as well. And am I the only one? Darren always seemed to win all these unnecessary immunities, which I've just found was this quite funny running story arc that Darren was never in any sort of danger. Darren always ended up winning all these sort of polls when he completely had no point in doing so.
I think he was the nice guy in there, but he wasn't the nice guy. He occasionally provided some drama and some storylines, and I think people felt sorry for him because of when John nominated him and things like that. So he came across as the nicer middle-aged guy, so people liked him for that reason.
Yeah, a housewives' favourite. I think that's the best way to describe him.
Yeah.
So, of course, the immunity ends up taking place, and we end up with an eviction process of Christopher, Daniela, Jeremy, John, Scotty T, and Tiffany. Very similar sort of names involved there, but it's one of those new names that ends up being evicted, and that's Christopher Maloney.
Yeah, because all the others had a storyline going on. His only storyline was, I'm not Gemma's bitch anymore, and he had a moment there where he was quite entertaining. If he had actually full-on gone for Gemma instead of doing it behind her back, he might have got more votes.
I felt the whole story with Christopher, though, I think one of the more compelling aspects of Christopher was the stuff away from the show, because I think that if you remember his series of The X Factor, he was the big bad guy during that season. And I felt that almost unjustly as well, because his whole thing, if you remember watching The X Factor, that series, his whole thing was, oh, I'm doing this for me nan, I'm a nice guy, I'm just doing this for me nan, etc. Me nan. And he became a real figure of hate. I mean, people couldn't stand Christopher.
Why?
Because he was a nice bloke who was just singing these nice ballads about nice people, and he was a housewives' grandma's favourite, and people hated him for that.
They hated him because he was nice.
Pretty much, yeah. And this is the X Factor.
Well, that's a good reason why I'm not watching that show then.
Yeah, exactly. So he had that baggage going into it, and I think I had a lot of people hating him for that. And yet, for me, he showed how good of a person he was, in my opinion, when he was on this show.
He was a nice guy. He showed that, he even put the thing aside with Daniela and whatever their problem was. And Yeah, no, he was a nice guy. He occasionally had his moments of popping up and being entertaining, but it was just a case of in a different house he might have been a bigger character.
Yes, certainly so. Yeah, I thought he was, and I was never going to miss Christopher, and I felt this was the perfect time for him to go.
No,
But,
yeah, all the others were going to provide far more than he was.
Yep. So we move on to eviction process number 6, and much in the same way, if you remember Celebrity 16, we had Paul Burrell coming in for a shopping task, which was the whole Masters and Servants, King and Queens task. We have another similar situation, which is the arrival of Gillian McKeith.
Yeah, there's always those celebrities, even Jimmy Savile back in the day, which we can't talk about anymore for obvious reasons. There's always those celebrities that they could not afford to bring in to be in the actual show, so they bring them in as a cameo.
Yes, and of course Gillian's cameo revolves around a whole detoxing task. And one of the interesting things was Gillian was asked to enter the house and choose the 4 housemates she thought was most toxic. She ended up choosing Stephanie, John, Scotty T, and Tiffany as the most toxic.
Although she made it clear that she wanted to choose Gemma, but she was sick or something.
Yes. A sickness that involves her dancing around when there's a party happening.
Yeah.
Yes.
The I'm a dumb blonde sickness, which always seems to happen in this show.
Well,
no, that's terminal, Paul.
Oh,
Yeah, that was obvious production influence trying to protect Gemma, but it's a show, you just get used to it. So, of course, we have the whole detoxing task, and Gillian McKeith's being Gillian McKeith about it. Just going on a bit of a tangent, though, what is the appeal of Gillian McKeith? Because you watch that task, and you watch the things that we're having to do as part of it, and you just thought to yourself, what is the appeal of this? Look at the people's poo.
She's seen as this old crackpot woman who thinks that she can help people's lives and chase them around, but people are just like, no, bitch, fuck off. Which basically is what happened here. They just, like, everybody became Gemma during this task. Nobody was playing along apart from Jeremy, pretty much. Oh, Tiffany played along until she had to give up the cigarettes. What made me laugh was during this task, everybody, when they were doing that thing like, yes, I want to quit cigarettes. An hour later, they were there out there smoking.
I would have loved them to have done that detox task when Nadia was in.
Or just, enforce it. Like, keep them locked in that room and don't let them out and don't let them smoke. But, asking too much. Because they'd probably all threaten to leave because, that was this series.
So, away from that, we also had the phone call task, which is housemates getting messages from home. But also, a part of that which I did like was they had almost these decoy messages. And people had to identify who they were. Mm-hmm. And one of the very few Gemma Collins moments I did like was where she picked up the phone, realised it was Christopher Maloney on the other line, and just said, go away, don't like you, put it back.
Yeah, this was a really good task, just because it was something new. Like, it wasn't some recycled bedsit, which we didn't get a bedsit this series. Holy shit.
Well, it was being used by David Guest for, like, 2/3.
Well, yeah, but, I think it was down to the fact of how badly it failed last year with Jenna Jameson and Farrah, how badly it failed and how much money they must have spent on that for it to go nowhere. I think they finally realised, okay, the dead horse has been beaten to the point there is no horse left. Like, no, we're not doing that anymore. So thank you, production, for not doing it. We got a new task that was fun and entertaining. We're probably going to get it every series now because of that. But no, they actually came up with something new that was good. And yeah, this task was good, getting the messages from the PPI insurance and having time and getting the messages from home. It was an entertaining way to do the whole we're getting messages from home, we're crying thing, but at least making it entertaining in the process. How they kept hanging up on Gillian, and yeah, the whole thing was rather good.
Yes, definitely one of the better tasks of the year. And also one of the things that happened as well, we sort of got another, probably the last great Stephanie meltdown. First off, from a row with Danielle Westbrook and some of the things that Danielle said during there. And then there was that moment with Jeremy in the diary room where they both vowed that they were going to quit with one another.
Yeah, because she went nuts about being nominated, and then her and Daniela did what they do and overreacted and said that, like, she overreacted and her and Tiffany egged each other on in overreacting, and then it led to Daniela saying something about her being bitter. So you had this girl who was acting out and just doing what she did sometimes, which made me really kind of disappointed in her, but again, she's young. and Daniela being bitter and using it as an excuse to nip at her, and that made it worse. And then at that point, she was like, "I'm done with Daniela. I want to leave." So in that entire thing between the two, there was always one of them that wanted to walk out after every argument. It kind of got funny at one point. It probably wasn't funny for the production team every time they had to replace the fire exit, but in terms of Daniela and Gemma. But yeah, it was. It was hilarious when she was like, "Where's Jeremy?" He's in the room that you're supposed to be in if you're playing along with this task. We built this entire room for this task, and none of you stayed in there. We just give up. It was the sound of the voice from the production at that point. Gemma Collins. This Gillian McKeith task was a complete and utter failure. This was the height of it. The only thing it provided was a room for Jeremy and Stephanie to get away from the housemates to stop it becoming even worse than it was. This was all over nothing, and there was pretty much every argument in that house. Nobody was on the right and nobody was in the wrong. Everybody was as bad as each other, and they all deserved to be. I'm glad they got over it.
I have to be honest though, I think some of the things Danielle especially said on her part were quite out there. I think one of the ones that really struck a chord with me was when she said, "The way you've been behaving, you're never going to be working in this business again." I thought, hang on a minute, Daniela Westbrook shoved a boatload of cocaine up her nose, basically ended up with an elephant's trunk, and yet she's giving Stephanie Davis advice on the way that she's supposed to behave.
Yeah, you're overreacting about a nomination, so you're not working again. You know what my reaction to that would have been? Love, I'm on Celebrity Big Brother. I'm never working again.
So that eviction ends up taking place, and it's Jeremy, Stephanie, and Tiffany who ends up being nominated. Tiffany obviously is going to end up being safe because she's really at the height of her popularity right now. So it's going to turn into a straight shootout between the showman's couple. One of the things I found quite interesting though was rather than just doing a straight Emma announces the house, next person evicted is Jeremy, etc., they end up using the phones. And what was our opinion of that?
Yeah, it was a good way to time the task. I think everything about this was perfect. I think the way that they reacted, this was the moment where the Stephanie and Jeremy showmance went from being, hated to liked, because I think this was the moment where finally she'd admitted that she wasn't going to be with her boyfriend anymore, and this was him leaving and all that stuff. It just played out like a film or a drama. It was just so, everything about this was fun and entertaining to watch, and it got to the point where it was like, oh my god, Stephanie, shut up about him after he'd left at one point. But at this point, it was, it was fun.
And I mean, because I read on the internet forums, I was following the forums during that eviction, and all the people were just saying, oh, what's the point of the phone calls? It's just completely pointless, etc. I thought that was great television, because you had the two phone boxes either side. Stephanie went into one, Jeremy went into the other. And I love that moment where you can hear the phone ringing, and then you realise, you see Jeremy picking up his, and the crowd gasping. I felt that I quite like that sort of almost twee behaviour of the audience to that.
It plays it up and makes it a bit more dramatic, and it changes up.
There's
ways to change the format that break the format, and there's ways to change the format just to make it something different and something more entertaining, which is fine.
It reminded me of like on Big Brother Canada, where you could just sort of hear mumblings of the crowd when they're all casting the votes to evict.
Yeah.
But yeah, I quite like that. And this is our chance to talk about Jeremy, because I have to say, for somebody who was in his showmance, who was one of those sort of generic jock alpha types, I quite liked him.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. Look, I'm not saying he provided, other than obviously the big night where he got drunk and him and Tiffany would spin the bottle and stuff, that was all quite those kind of holiday camp shows. Yeah, it reminded me of that sometimes. But other than that, he didn't really provide much other than the storyline. But I liked his storyline. I think he was rational for the most part throughout the entire show. I think he was one of the only people in there that was rational and reacting rationally to things, and that was kind of refreshing. So yeah, was he a deserving winner? No, but he was a different character in there that provided something that wasn't making me go, oh god damn it, and it provided a showmance that wasn't toxic. It was a showmance that actually had stuff in it to watch and be interested in, because neither of them by time at that point was in denial anymore. Both of them were going to the diary room and expressing their full feelings, so it was almost kind of like watching a movie or something. At that point it was crazy.
And to their credit, for these early stages of their post-show relationships, they are still together. They haven't broken up yet. So...
Absolutely. It's a case of it was a relationship that happened organically and naturally, whereas with the other two, it felt like, oh, we're two attractive people, so I guess we'll get together and sleep together because that's what we do. Whereas these two, it happened naturally and they liked each other as people. And I think that's going to be a relationship that will last because they didn't go too far in the house as well.
One thing I will say, though, about Jeremy, though, is do we have a contender for a new number one on the Bobby Sable scale?
The model who went in there and wasn't really famous.
Yes.
Well, look, Bobby Sable didn't provide Sweet FA. This guy provided an alright showman, so...
So, a safe number 2?
Yeah.
Maybe number 3 behind Camille Lee?
Yeah. Look, I don't know any of these people, so... They're all strangers to me.
Yes. So everybody's like number 1 on the Sable scale to you?
Yeah, to me, it's like, I kind of recognise that guy from this TV show once. I don't watch soaps or anything either, so...
You don't watch soaps? My God.
I don't watch English television in general anymore.
You're not missing much. I mean, Dickensian's good, but apart from that...
I watch Sherlock.
Good call. Maybe that's our calling after Big Archive ends. We just talk about television and ramble about
we just bring whatever we can find from some sort of format of TV and just bring it to the table. Finally, a reason to talk about.
Look, here's the deal. I'm a superhero guy, and there is enough TV on for me right now. My weeks are full right now.
You're just basically swamped in Batman.
Yes, yeah. It's ridiculous now at the moment. There's going to be that point where the bubble bursts, but until then, I'm going to fucking enjoy it because this year, in terms of the movies and Netflix and TV, holy shit. Anyway, so back to the topic.
Yes, back to the topic. Let's stop bitching about Deadpool and all that, and back to the other thing.
Yes. But we are going to be talking about something that Deadpool might do, actually, which is Gemma's birthday sabotage.
This was good. But I wish they chose somebody who would have reacted to it more.
Yes.
She didn't really react. If it had been Tiffany's birthday, that would have been brilliant.
Because I think as well, one of the big problems is sort of, we touched on it earlier, which is that Gemma is so cynical to the reality TV experience. I think she clicked on from quite an early stage what was happening.
Yeah.
But there are still a lot of great moments that came from that. There's that food fight between Scotty T as well, where he basically ends up chucking the cake over the wall. There was also Tiffany as well, and I think, once again, Tiffany steals the show, where she has to give this nice inspirational speech to Gemma and how great her birthday is, but the whole key is she has to make it about herself.
Yeah.
And I think, really, in a just world, this is Tiffany's winner moment.
Absolutely. Tiffany, anytime she was given a task, she gave it 110%.
But, of course, Gemma is the focus of this week, which obviously, for reasons we'll get to later on in the show, but also... if there is a moment that ends up symbolising Gemma's downfall, it's yet another task refusal.
What was this one for again?
I think this is the one where they have to all give up something, and I think they ask Gemma to give up her hair straighteners. Everybody gives up something, but she refuses to, because she says she can't live without her hair straighteners.
Oh yeah, God. First world problems.
First world problems. But unfortunately, the horror is nearly over. It's Daniela versus Gemma versus Stephanie. Took place on the Tuesday evening, and... hallelujah, Gemma ends up leaving over Daniela Westbrook.
Yeah, I did think that Daniela should have gone. As much as I hated Gemma, at least she was providing something. Daniela at this point had just become Gemma's bitter sidekick.
I do agree to an extent, though, but I think by that point, though, Gemma's storyline had been done. I felt that her character was just being exhausted. And I think in the same way that Perez Hilton needed to leave Celebrity 15, Gemma Collins needed to leave Celebrity 17 because they needed that moment where the show could breathe without that exhausting...
Yeah, and it was nice for the last couple of weeks that we got to see not only I railed on Daniela a little bit there, but we got to see a nicer side of her when Gemma wasn't around to encourage that kind of behaviour. We got to see a nicer side of pretty much everybody as everybody put their stuff aside and just got on with it and just enjoyed it. Not for the lack of production trying to mess it up every couple of days. Here's a task where we're going to show you things you've said about each other to get you arguing again. And just as Stephanie and Daniela have put their their problems aside, we're going to remind them of the things they said about each other to get them arguing again, because, yeah.
I always felt that the housemates always seemed to walk around eggshells when it came to Gemma, because she was such a diva character, and because she was so demanding, that people couldn't be themselves because she was always there.
Yeah.
And this is where basically we talk about Gemma Collins and just basically how awful she was.
Yeah, I hope she's back to her life and running her businesses, and God bless, dear girl. Don't ever come on any of these reality shows again, because you should know what you're signing up for.
The one thing that I just don't get about Gemma Collins, though, is why was she given such preferential treatment from the production team? Because obviously the production team know what the forums think. They know what the diehards are going through their heads. They read all the Twitter feeds, etc. They knew that Gemma wasn't popular, and yet they kept pandering to her and making it out as if she was this central, important character. I think part of the reason why Gemma ended up having such a big ego was because of the way the production team behaved around her. And I mean, I'm hearing rumours that she might be getting her own fly-on-the-wall TV series, basically her own version of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And yet, obviously, the demand is not there because of the way the audience reacted.
Obviously, somebody's enjoying it. Obviously, there's people who are fans of her and they're giving them money, because that's why the production team would favour somebody if they're bringing in the money.
But I mean, when even the eviction crowd, and I mean, Hertfordshire's right next door to Essex, when even that eviction crowd is baying for your blood, obviously there's an issue.
Yeah, I don't know. There must be somebody who likes her.
Yeah. So we move on to the finale night then. Not really much to say between those last few days, between Gemma's eviction before the finale. There was a press conference task where not much really seemed to happen. So we move on to the finale night, and in 6th place we end up losing John. Now, I was a little bit surprised by this, because there was a point during the later stages of the show where John actually did build up a bit of popularity, and I mean, I wasn't expecting him to win or anything, but I was expecting maybe 3rd or 4th place. To see him coming out first, and there to be this real dramatic downturn against him, sort of took me a bit off guard, I think.
Yeah. But he embraced it, at least.
He did, and I mean, he even had the full-on panto.
He grew the mustache for the final episode, for the finale. Yeah, look, John, he nominated obviously Darren, and that turned everybody against him. There was times where he was a bit smugging up himself, but he didn't do much to deserve the hate that he got. I'm not sure why people turned on him as much as they did. Yes, he could act smug. Yes, he could act like a twat. I think the way he acted the last week out when Stephanie was doing that task, throwing the milk and stuff, I think that made me dislike him. But nothing he had done up to this point, other than nominating Darren, had made me hate him,
Because one of the things with John was, my idea which I had with John going into the series was, especially after that first night, he was going to be one of those people who was going to be so cynical of the audience, going to be so self-aware of what they were thinking. He was just going to be doing everything as if to say, they'll like me if I do this, they'll like me if I say this about this person, or do this to this person. And yet, whether it was because he just forgot about the cameras or not, that seemed to go away, I felt.
Yeah.
And I felt the John that left was a very different type of character to the John that came into the show.
Yeah, because he realised that he wasn't popular, so he was...
Yeah, so he embraced the villain.
Yeah.
So, of course, John ends up being 6th, and with the 5 people that we have remaining, it's no surprise Danielle Westbrook is in 5th place. And we sort of touched on Danielle a bit, and how she almost essentially became Gemma Collins' lackey. Was there any sort of positive aspects to her as a character?
Yeah, but she was nice. She was a nice woman. I don't know. She needs to go to therapy, I think. There's some issues there that need to be sorted out.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying as well, though, that Danielle Westbrook, she'd been approached to do a lot of the Channel 4 versions, but it failed the psych tests?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yes.
Oh, God. What? I can't believe they'd actually do something like this, right? You clearly see someone that is basically mentally defective, and yet, here we go, let's put her on there.
Look, she acted normal most of the time. She was on the side a lot. She appeared to have a life together. It was just the breakdowns. It was just how far she went in the... Yeah, I don't know why she was as upset as she was. She's got some issues, I think, about... She wanted to be portrayed a certain way, And when she realised the way she was acting was coming across the way she didn't want to be portrayed, she wanted out of there because she wasn't going to get the profile that she wanted out of the show.
And then she'll be off doing bit part places in Hollyoaks or whatever, the Waterloo Road. That's where nearly all the old soap actors go these days.
Oh.
So, of course, we move on from Daniela, and now we come to the moment where the internet forums implode. Tiffany finishing 4th.
Xenophobia, man. Look, I've said this. I knew she wasn't going to win.
I mean, I knew she wasn't going to win. I thought she was going to end up finishing 2nd. I mean,
yeah. Again, look, the way she was with Angie that wasn't right. But she was so entertaining for the majority of the show. She was the show. She was the best character in there. She should have won. But I think, again, it's just the voting demographic, unfortunately. I think it's just a case of if there was more demographics being appealed to, more demographics would watch. And I think that you'd get a better sense of a vote. I think our demographic are in the minority. I don't think there's many, straight or just kind of regular guys watching this show. And that shows in the votes that the majority of the people who watch this show are teenage girls and housewives.
Because, I mean, I spoke to a lot of casual viewers on the run-up to the finale, and they sort of people who would dip in and out of the show, and they were saying Tiffany to win. And if you looked at the Twitter, it was all Tiffany. Facebook was all Tiffany. There was nothing to make you think that she was going to finish 4th. I mean, with a lot of these
because the people who go on those forums, the people we talk to in life, are not the people who do the majority of the voting.
And that's a real shame as well. And one of the things I'd love to see on reality TV in general is something that is a voting format that reflects the actual views of the majority of the audience.
I think if all the people who are on those forums and listening to the show now, if you didn't vote, you can't complain about who won.
I don't really want to get political about this, and I apologise if I do, but someone made a really good point on, I think it was This Is Big Brother. If Tiffany can't win the show, what chance does any other black female have? Because that's always been a big issue surrounding the perception of black females on Big Brother. And yet here we have Tiffany, probably one of the best housemates that we've ever had, and she can't get anywhere to win. She was
the epitome of that stereotypical angry black lady, and if she can't win for being that, then yeah.
I thought she was hilarious. She is, and I know it's early to say it, but in my opinion, she is one of the Big Brother all-stars.
Yeah, she was great, but the great ones of the series never usually win because, that's just how it goes. Like, the winning, to me, I mean, I assume they get more money or something like that. To me, the winning doesn't really matter anymore because
not anymore. No.
Because the right winner never wins, so who cares?
Yeah. Obviously, people want to see more Darren Day, and this comes on to our 3rd place finisher, which, apart from being a nice middle-aged man, was there anything else to him?
I think this was a similar sort of situation with a Barrymore. I think this was a sort of thing where people wanted to vote for him because he was, a changed man and shown that he was a nice guy and all this kind of stuff. And again, he was sort of the guy that a lot of the voting audience wanted as either their dad or their husband.
One of the things that's always confused me about Darren Day, though, because Darren obviously got a lot of criticism for his lack of contribution to the show. The thing is, Darren Day has done the reality TV circuit for years. He's done I'm a Celebrity, he's done the games, he's done pretty much every reality show going, and he's been a dud on every single one of them. What made them think he was going to be any different this time?
I don't know. Obviously, he's got name recognition enough to be cast.
Do you think that star power plays a part in these sort of shows, and sort of
I think there's a couple that are cast for star power. Then there's about 5 that are cast because they were good in other reality shows. And then the rest is just like, who can we afford with the money we got left?
We can get Kim Kardashian's best friend, apparently. But apart from that, let's just get a load of people.
We can come on here and we can want the Hogans of the world. We can want the Flairs of the world. We can want some of these higher priced people. But unfortunately, they are like, well, we could get this one really expensive person, or we could get 2 less expensive people, and that's unfortunately what's going to happen. So.
I'm still hoping for Tonya Harding. So we move on to our runner-up, which is Stephanie. Now, there's an argument to make that if you look at the housemate who had the biggest story arc throughout the season, Stephanie has to be there.
Yeah, I of these last two, Stephanie should have won.
Yes.
Because, obviously Tiffany should have won, but out of these two, Stephanie should have won, because at the end of the day, she had her ups and downs. She was mostly a nice person, but she, at the same time, did have arguments. She had a massive storyline throughout the show. She contributed way more. But she had what Scotty T had, but she contributed way more in the process. She was one of the main people in the show. She was one of the main talking points of the show. And out of these two, she should have won. Absolutely. I think she was a better person. I think she was a more genuine person. And I think that she contributed way more to the show as a whole.
I totally agree. And I think as well, look, I can't forgive Stephanie's behaviour, and I think that anybody cheating on their boyfriend is wrong. But she learned from her mistake. She realised she'd done wrong. She accepted it for what she was. And I think that the way the audience started to turn in her favour in such a short space of time, I felt was really compelling.
Look, she's a 22-year-old girl who's very, very confused. But I'm sure we come back with her at 30, she'll be a completely different person. She'll have found who she is.
Totally agree. And of course, after everybody finished turning off the television screens out of disgust, some bloke called Scotty T.
I have something to admit. As soon as I knew that he'd won, I watched the rest of the show and fast forward. I didn't even watch his interview.
I mean, what did he do? What did he do?
He was the cheeky, chappy lad who got to the point that I just hate on this show. It's a case of, again, he comes on the show and his opening line in his VT is, "I'm known for getting drunk and shagging a lot of girls." Well, good for you. It's a case of, I don't know who likes these type of people. I don't know why women like this type of guy. I don't understand the appeal. He was a nice enough guy, totally, but his values and his life goals are, is what's wrong with society. Or at least some of what's wrong with society, and well, if they want to support that because he's a good-looking guy, okay, whatever.
And I think as well, one of the other big problems with Scotty T from a television concept is, what is the point of watching a show like Big Brother, getting emotionally invested for 3-4 weeks at a time, only to have somebody win, completely irrelevant to that?
Because he went through the show and didn't offend anybody, didn't piss anybody off. Everybody else had a moment where there was a reason to talk about them. His only talking point was, oh, look, he's kind of getting on with Megan, kind of.
But even then, the thing is with Scotty T is that there wasn't anything about that. There wasn't these elements of, he is a nice guy and we like...
His Jersey Shore runoff! Why do I live in a world?
He wins because he has the fan base from Jersey Shore, and then the same fan base are the same people who are voting.
I totally agree, and I think one of the best examples of this is I actually have one of my work colleagues, and she watches all the MTV reality shows, and I asked her who she wanted to win the show, and she said, "I want Scotty T." I asked her why, and she couldn't give an answer. She couldn't say why she wanted to win based on what she'd seen on Big Brother.
Because she was mesmerised by the pecs and pectorals and bullshit.
His best moment was the spin the bottle thing, and he wasn't even the star of that. That was Tiffany.
I mean, even if you look at his best bits, they're nearly all Tiffany clips. I mean, honestly, if you had a vote right now, if there was a vote to win between, let's say, Scotty T, the Shetland Pony, Gillian McKeith, and David Bowie, who would you choose to win?
Are we talking post-death or pre-death?
Both.
David Bowie.
Yeah, David Bowie.
Well, there you go. David Bowie is the winner of Celebrity Big Brother.
Huzzah!
Yes. And this is where we talk about the series in general, because I have to be honest, it wasn't one of my favourites. I think that it almost fit in the same sort of mould as Celebrity 15, where we had a strong start, we had a lot of good funny moments early on, but the boot order and certain storylines come to the forefront started to drag it down a bit.
I really enjoyed the series. I thought it had some of the best moments early on. It had some great arguments, it had some great characters. I thought the main showmance was actually a genuine romance and not just fake for the cameras. I thought that Tiffany was one of the best characters we've ever had. The David Bowie of it was awesome, and I think, yes, it maybe went on a little too long. Yes, the wrong person won, but it didn't drag down what was an overall very entertaining series.
To be honest,
I had this feeling of anyone in the neighbour could possibly go onto Celebrity Big Brother these days. I mean, for the entirety of the beginning of the show, it was basically fodder to basically fuel gossip magazines. But
yeah, and especially when people who are bigger celebrities than any of these people are in the civilian show now as well. It's these lines have been just blurred.
Yeah, I mean, next thing you know, you've got a Big Brother celebrity thing going on.
Well, that's probably what's going to happen eventually.
The biggest surprise for me is that more people would choose to completely break every bone in their body on the jump rather than go on Celebrity Big Brother.
I actually think that the jump's more entertaining now.
Because
considering the fact they're bringing in...
Unfortunately, it's a reputation. They feel like it's poison to their careers to go on the show now. And so you go on that show if you haven't got any other way to make money.
And on that positive note, we come to the end of the show. Obviously, we've had a great time talking about Celebrity Big Brother. We always do on these podcasts. We really enjoy actually just, let's be honest, completely ripping into the Celebrity Big Brother franchise and the civilian version. And we'll be looking forward to doing it again next time. Not going to make any guarantees over which episode we're actually going to be talking about, because I've been promising we'd be doing Celebrity Hijack for the past year or so. That is probably, though, the one that we will be focusing on, depending on what we get together, depending on if Mitchell's involved, etc. But for now, though, that is the end of the show. This has been Big Brother's Big Archive. I've been Carl Bainbridge. That's been Carl Dutton.
Thank you, everybody. I do promise I do enjoy this show. It's like watching a car crash. You just can't look away.
And that's been Paul Barron.
I can't believe I live in a world where Scotty T won something.
And we'll be seeing you again in the future. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.